Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some people seem to naturally thrive in sports and activities, while others struggle to find their place? Today we're diving into some fascinating research that looks at neurodivergence in physical activity and sport, and how we might be making things harder than they need to be. This isn't just about kids with specific labels, it's about how our brains work differently and how that impacts our experiences, especially when it comes to moving our bodies. The researchers here are asking a really big question. Are the barriers neurodivergent people face in sports and physical activities really about them, or are they about the systems and expectations we've built around these activities? So, what exactly is neurodivergence? Think of it as a spectrum of how our brains are wired. Some brains process information differently, some experience the world through different sensory lenses, and some communicate and interact in unique ways. It is a natural variation in human wiring. The authors point out that in the world of sports and physical activity, we're starting to see a lot more interest in this topic, which is great. But a lot of the research and even how we approach helping neurodivergent people participate relies on old ideas that focus on what's wrong with them, rather than what's different. They highlight two main ways of looking at neurodivergence. The first is the medical model. This is where conditions like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and others are seen as disorders or deficits, something wrong with the individual that needs to be fixed or managed. Treatments and interventions in this model often focus on trying to make the person more normal or align their behavior with typical expectations. The authors call this a form of benevolent ableism, which sounds nice but can still be harmful because it pathologizes an individual's natural way of being. But then there is the neurodiversity paradigm. This is a much more empowering view. It suggests that brain differences are natural human variations, like biodiversity in nature. It's not about deficits, but about celebrating and accepting different ways of thinking, sensing, and experiencing the world. From this perspective, the challenges neurodivergent people face aren't because their brains are broken, but because the world, including sports and physical activities, is often designed for neurotypical brains and doesn't account for these differences. So instead of fixing the person, we need to fix the environment. Now, how does this play out in sports and physical activities? The researchers explain that a lot of past research has been stuck in that medical model. They looked at things like motor skill difficulties, assumed lack of motivation, or sensory sensitivities as reasons why neurodivergent people might not participate. While they did find some positive effects of structured exercise on physical health and skills, these studies often didn't change the bigger picture. They didn't question the environments themselves. They dive into the real-world barriers. Think about it. Bright lights, loud noises, certain textures of clothing or equipment, the constant need to follow complex social cues, or waiting in lines for many neurodivergent individuals, especially those on the autism spectrum. These sensory and social elements in typical sports settings can be overwhelming, uncomfortable, or even painful. This can lead to exclusion, bullying, and a feeling that they just don't belong. They also talk about how coaches and instructors often lack the training to understand and support neurodivergent participants. Sometimes, neurodivergent people are described using negative terms, making them seem scary or challenging. This makes it even harder for them to enjoy activities, leading many to describe community sport as stressful and unenjoyable. And it's not just about the activity itself. Practical things like transportation difficulties or where someone lives can also be barriers. The key takeaway here is that participation for neurodivergent people is often conditional. It requires them to constantly try to fit in, to mask their discomfort, to suppress their natural behaviors, or to just endure systems that weren't built with them in mind. When this effort becomes too much, exclusion is often the result. And importantly, this isn't because they lack interest or ability. It is because the environments themselves fail to accommodate or affirm their unique ways of being. This leads to a crucial question: how much are our sports and PR practices built around neurotypical assumptions and expectations? This is where the concept of Neuro-Normativity comes in. The authors define it as a form of ableism that puts neurotypical ways of thinking, sensing, and behaving on a pedestal, seeing different ways as defective. It's about the invisible taken for granted norms that shape our sports and play environments. Think about the fast pace of some drills, the rapid-fire instructions, the reliance on subtle social cues like eye contact, or even the common coach phrases like switch on or dig deep. These all subtly suggest an ideal athlete who is attentive, self-sufficient, socially fluent. and very orderly. They offer a really powerful example from one of the author's research experiences. In a coach education program focused on autism, coaches sometimes acted out stereotypical autistic behaviors in role-playing scenarios, even mimicking stimming or being disruptive. This was deeply ableist and revealed how the training itself might be reinforcing negative stereotypes, rather than fostering genuine understanding and inclusion. Crucially, neurodivergent perspectives were absent from the design and delivery of this education. And this neuronormativity isn't just an issue in coaching. It affects neurodivergent people throughout their lives. Parents of autistic children often find their child's behavior misunderstood, labeled as disruptive, and sometimes excluded from programs because their needs are seen as too challenging or a risk. This forces parents into a lot of hidden labor to find suitable activities, and sometimes they even decide it's easier to just avoid structured sports altogether to escape the stigma and embarrassment. As these individuals grow into adolescence and adulthood, the effects of repeated exclusion and neuronormative assumptions can be profound. Many autistic adults report feeling like they don't belong in sports spaces. They often internalize these negative experiences, blaming themselves and seeing their own differences as the problem. The authors call this psycho-emotional disableism, a form of internal oppression that damages self-esteem and self-confidence. It's a heavy burden to carry. This leads to the crucial implications. The authors argue that we need to move beyond simply trying to help neurodivergent people fit in. We need to aim for neurodivergent justice. This means critically examining how our existing systems, policies, and practices in sport and pay actually cause harm. Coercion and enforced neuronormative conformity. It's about dismantling the structures that marginalize neurodivergent participants. They propose using something called disability bioethics as a lens to understand the moral implications of disability and push for systemic change that fosters equity, inclusion, agency, and dignity for everyone. This involves challenging those long-held taken for granted assumptions about what sport and paya should look like, and exploring how things could be fundamentally different. A really exciting suggestion is the development of neurodivergent methodologies. This means designing research in ways that are aligned with neurodivergent ways of sensing, thinking, and relating. Imagine research that uses sensory-friendly interviews, flexible communication methods, or even arts. Based approaches to help everyone involved communicate and understand each other better. This approach not only disrupts traditional research methods, but also promotes truly neuro-affirming practices. After years of research with autistic individuals and their families, the authors are convinced that the real issue isn't a lack of interest or motivation in sports and physical activities. It is the persistent neuro-ableism and its damaging effects that limit what participation can look like. They pose a powerful thought: what if these so-called barriers aren't personal shortcomings at all, but rather signs that the world, including sports and PA, is built with limited imagination and narrow expectations? The core message is that until ableism is dismantled, neuronormative policies and practices will continue to dominate. The challenge for us and for the field of sport and physical activity is to reimagine these environments. We need to create spaces where neurodivergent people and their families can truly participate, flourish, and live their best lives on their own terms. This research is a really important step in that direction, urging us to look beyond individual fixes and towards systemic change. So, what do you think? Does this resonate with your experiences or observations? What are some ways we could make sports and physical activities more neuro-inclusive in our communities? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with anyone who might benefit, and don't forget to subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more journeys into the fascinating world of psychology and science. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.